Welcome to Day by Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We run a session here every Friday to allow you, the audience, to ask questions essentially about Data Vault 2.0, about cloud computing, cluster computing, data mining, and so on. And if essentially you can ask all kinds of questions. You can use the chat here. You can use the Q&A function here in the client. You can also raise your hand. I would give you live voice. Don't misuse this, right? And I will show you a form after today's session where you can also submit your questions. And people do, which is just great. And if you receive multiple questions, I will be cherry picking. If you receive no questions at all, I will talk about my little side project here, my little cluster, which haven't been running for a while because I was quite busy last years. But yeah, so that's the idea. But we received a question, so no worries. Let me just share it to you guys. This is about multi-active satellites on links. I'm not 100% sure if I fully understood the question, but let me talk about it. So the question is, can the multi-active satellite be used on links? And well, the answer is the quick answer is yes. Considering that on link, we have the option of using the child dependent key. Please ignore the fact that the link doesn't have a hash column on all hub keys. Okay. So I was confused because in this case, so these are here two examples, and I rearranged them a bit to better fit on the slide. Those are two examples, and I put a little blue bar in between, right? So don't get confused. We're looking at two different options, two different models. The first model here has a multi-active satellite attached to the link, but I was confused because there were two hash keys here. But apparently here, please ignore the fact that the link doesn't have a hash column on all hub keys. You're right, there would be a primary key involved here for the link entry, and then you would refer to this primary key of the link. You would refer from the satellite essentially, and then the type key. So we're looking at essentially a combined hash key derived from both business keys essentially in reality, and then because I was about to criticize this, and then you have the type key that essentially indicates when you have multi-active data. Let's say phone numbers, or in this case, different coverage, sub-coverage, different types of coverages or different types of phone numbers and so on. And then some LTS. So that's the primary key. A hash key for the link, not those two, the type code for the multi-active attribute, as we call it, and then the load daytime stamp. Option number one, or having option number two, where you have a hub. There would be two hubs involved here, right? There would be hub. Yeah, there are actually. There's one hub for policy, one hub for coverage, just like here as well, because they are referred in a link. But then you attach the data to this multi-active data to the coverage group hub. Now, which one is the preferred option? So first of all, let's talk about the dependent child link first, because just to get this out of the way, or just to make sure we're on the same page. It's a little bit similar, I would say, the dependent child link and the multi-active data. However, we use or when would I use which option? When would I prefer which option? So I'm always not sure exactly which I would use. It depends really on the actual data, right? So given what I see here, I would use a dependent child link when I'm looking at facts, because from these dependent child links, you often create fact entities, transactions, events, line items, for example, from an invoice, from an order. When you have market baskets in retail, that's when you're looking at the I was just double checking the microphone here. That's when you look at retails in retail business at the market basket. You have multiple line items or the multiple items in the market basket as well. That's when I use a dependent child link with a dependent child key, where you have the key, the line item, for example, inside the link structure. And then you would attach a satellite, maybe a standard satellite to it, just to make sure you describe all the line items. What's the quantity? What's the discount? What's the line item description, right? The text field on the line item and so on. So I'm using the dependent child key, the dependent child link, when I'm dealing with facts like transactions, events, line items, and so on. And the multi-active satellite, well, it's apparently for multi-active data, and we often see this on master data. You have customers or employees with multiple phone numbers, with multiple addresses, and so on. That's where I would prefer the multi-active satellite essentially. Now, is that a 100% answer? No, it's not. It really depends on your actual data. So I don't want to just give you an indicator what my first attempt brain-wise would be, but I would always double check what I'm looking at, what kind of data I'm looking at, right? So that's the difference. So given policies here, I might tend to be more on the well, I believe, to be honest, it's more like master data. So I'm looking at multi-active data most probably. So you have the policy, you have the coverage, and then so I might tend, I might tend to multi-active satellite on this link here, essentially this design here, and I mean both designs would be valid as long as you have one hash key for the link and you attach the multi-active satellite on the link, right? Both designs would be valid to attach the multi-active satellite on the link structure or on the hub, I believe. And both, let's assume both are valid. Again, depends on the data, right? Then I would wonder, so of both options which I'm going to use, I would wonder what my users are going to use with this data. What kind of, are they want to produce facts from this data here? Or do they want to produce dimensions from this? Because for dimensions, I believe, again, without knowing the exact data, I believe that this design would prefer dimensions. If you consider a coverage group to be a dimension, and you want to have the claim, well, the claims is something else. I just see this is coverage and this is claims. Claims could be a depend chart link, right? Because it's more events and transactions or some events, facts, essentially, what you want to analyze of the claims. So that could be actually, that could be a depend chart link. This could be here, I believe, more multi-active data. So maybe you need both, depending on what kind of data you're looking at, right? So I'm really much data-driven here in this design. If it's coverage, I would tend potentially to use a multi-active satellite. If it's a claim, I might tend to use a depend chart link, but you know the insurance industry better than me, to be honest. That's the other thing. So yeah, so that's the idea. That's how I would model this. But again, it's not a 100% answer. It's not it's not that easy, but that's my first attempt, my first thought, essentially, right? There's one more comment I want to get rid of, and that's the type code. If this is the raw data vault, because I assume you model here in the raw data vault, you're capturing the raw data from the source system. I'm not a big fan of using a type key as a multi-active attribute. What we do is actually, well, there's a couple of issues here. In this case, you trust the source system, and I never trust a source system, especially not in insurance when you have an auditable environment. You trust the source system always delivering you only one sub coverage _1 and not two records. Might be reasonable from a business perspective, but what about dirty data and so on, right? So, or just some pure mistakes, whatever. So, or data inconsistencies in the source system and so on. So I don't trust the source system, and that's a potential risk here in the raw data vault. In the business vault, I agree. I'll talk about that later. But in raw data vault, I don't like to use a type key. What I'm using is in the staging area, in your data lake or staging area, we introduce a subsequence value. So every row in your relational staging table or in your Parquet or Avro file in a data lake or JSON array gets a unique sequence value. The sequence value must be unique per load date. So per batch you're staging in a data lake or a relational table, you have to introduce a unique sequence value per batch. So if you bucket your Avro files or Parquet files in a data lake, you keep continuing this value, right? So you don't restart the sequence with every new mini bucket, with every new Parquet file. You keep continuing it, keep counting. And so the sequence is unique per load date timestamp by definition. You can either restart it for the next batch, for the next load date, or you just continue loading it. In a relational database, I'm super lazy. In the relational table, I just continue it. So I don't reset the generator, essentially. In a data lake, it's easier to restart the number for every batch because I have to generate it anyway in my Python script. So I'm lazy. Both options are valid because what I'm interested in the end is to have a unique value per load date. And if I keep it going, who cares? It's still unique, right? And if it's even if it's overrunning, who cares? As long as it's not overrunning inside your batch, it's all good. And hopefully you don't have that much data. Now, so that's the idea. So I have the subsequence, a unique value per load date in the staging area. And that's what I'm using as a multi-active attribute for the primary key of the multi-active satellite all the time. I'm generating the subsequence, so I can more or less rely on it, or I can generate this on the fly using a row num generator from the SQL statement. Not my preferred option, but it's also working. So I always have a subsequence value from the staging area, which I use as a multi-active attribute. Why? Super simple. Simple, as I said, I'm just lazy. It's the most simple approach. development-wise, but also from a metadata perspective for your automation tool. It's the most simple approach. And what could, so you can easily define it, right? And what could go wrong? I mean, seriously, if something goes wrong, you cause the issue, so you can fix it. You can fix it by yourself. If this value if you receive duplicate values on this one here, you have to either remodel your model or you have to talk to the source system guys to fix the problem for you, essentially. And both is not the preferred option, essentially. So I rely on the subsequence from the source system. But for the business vault, it depends. Again, I'm lazy here, especially in this regard. So if it's easier for me to reuse the subsequence from the raw data vault now, I just keep using it in the business vault. If it's easier to use a type code, because I remember one case where we had where we built a calculation engine. The calculation engine was picking up some data from the raw data vault and maybe from business vault, calculating something and writing back the results into the multi-actor satellite in the business vault. But then the next stage jumped in, the next calculation rule stepped in. Again, query data from the raw data vault, from the business vault, even the previous results from the previous runs from this target multi-actor satellite, calculated something and wrote back the results into the same multi-actor satellite for the next step of the rule engine to calculate something. In this case, I need to generate sequences because the sequences the number of sequences don't match anymore, or the granularity of the sequences don't match anymore the raw data vault. So I have to generate my own sequences. Or because I'm lazy, I just use the type code of the rule that calculated something. I use that type code as a multi-active attribute in the target, because every rule per hash key was only creating or calculating one value for the target, essentially. So that's the idea. So I had the type code in my flow anyway already, so I was just using it essentially. So that's the lazy way. And then again, what could go wrong? If something goes wrong with type code, well, I mess it up in my business vault, right? So I can fix it. I'm not depending on a third party. And it's again easier. Again, for the raw data vault, think about this. If you want to use a type code as a multi-active attribute, you have to, in automation tools, you have to define the type code to be used, the column to be used from the source system, right? With the subsequence, you just say, well, this is multi-active, and then off you go. You're done. So it's just easier. So again, if it's coverage, if it's claim, depending on a bit on your understanding, I might tend to use a depend child link for claims and a multi-active satellite for coverage, most probably. And a multi-active satellite could be attached, and it's not very uncommon, to be honest, to attach a multi-active satellite on either a hub or a link. Doesn't really matter. And it's true for all the satellites. I don't believe that there's no exception. There might be some non-desired solutions. A record, like a pit table on a link table becomes larger than the pit table on a hub, because you have typically more records in a link table, especially in large links. And then for the record source tracking satellite, these become large by itself, and on links they become even larger. So that's what you have to think about. But other than that, there's no big deal with it. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think I captured or covered everything that I want to talk about. No clear answer, to be honest. Depends a bit on your data, right? So that's what it is. But I hope you got something in return here. So if you have a question like this, and thanks for the image here, that's why I actually preferred your question. Use this form here, sfr.ee/dvfriday. That's where you can submit your questions essentially, and then type in your question, maybe upload some pictures, just like this person did. Keep it small, just like this one here, which was really perfect. Not too large, so it fits on an HD screen. That's what you would essentially want to do, because this shows up on these typical video platforms, right? And also consider going for scalefree.to/webinars. That's where you find two more webinars, one on DBT, one on Warescape, where our experts, I'm not a tool expert to be honest, where our experts talk about those automation capabilities essentially as well, and tips and tricks for these tools. And if you can't wait for next Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time, then consider joining the Data Vault community, the Data Vault Innovators community that we founded together with Ignition Data. And that's where you also, it's a forum style community essentially, where you can ask questions and get answers much faster than here once per week. And you also get multiple answers for multiple questions essentially. All right, cool. Thanks for joining. Nice weather. And I hope you enjoy the weekend, guys. See you next Friday. Thank you, guys.